The Opperman Report is brought to you by Aquadam.net. You can give them a call at 707-764-2119. A flooded home is never easy to deal with. You're left with the mess to clean up, the insurance companies to deal with, and not to mention all the memories, the precious memories that are lost in the flood. You can never replace those. And Aquadam can be a tool in your arsenal to protect your home and property from the floodwaters. The cofferdam is filled with water to control water and is reusable as long as it's taken care of. It can protect your home or business from rising floodwaters like a dam, but without the beavers. It can also be used in construction. If you need an area to be dewatered, an Aquadam can do the job. An Aquadam was used at SeaWorld in Orlando for the Mako roller coaster ride during the coaster's construction by dewatering the work area. An Aquadam is now dewatering the work area at San Antonio SeaWorld for their newest roller coaster ride. An Aquadam has been used in many construction projects all around the U.S. and all around the world. Now give Aquadam a call, 707-764-2119. You can look them up online at aquadam.net. You can find them on Facebook at Aquadam Inc. You call them up, you email them, you tell them Ed Opperman sent you, and they're going to take 10% off the price. Aquadam.net, 707-764-2119.
Are you ready to change your life, but don't know how to start? Is your stress and worries keeping you awake at night? Have you been battling grief, anxiety, or depression all alone? Have you lost touch with your own sense of being or spirituality? Soul Free Therapies offers professional and affordable live video streaming counseling and coaching services from the comfort of your own home. Sessions offered in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Go to our website at www.soul-free.com and book your first session today.
Silk City Hot Sauce. A small batch hot sauce prepared with farm-grown peppers. Rich and vibrant taste, no artificial ingredients, 100% pure goodness. 8 flavors from mild to wild. The sweet and spicy Mango Madness, the green jalapeno sauce called Aztec Attack. The Dragon features fire-roasted peppers and pure Vermont maple syrup. Killer hot sauces for the true hot sauce fanatic. A blend of ghost peppers, habanero peppers, honey, and garlic, and more. You gotta see the bottles, too. Each flavor has original comic book artwork. You gotta see them. Go to SilkCityHotSauce.com. SilkCityHotSauce.com. Enter promo code ED, ED, to save 15%, and you'll also receive a free bottle of hot sauce. If you find yourself in need of legal representation, it can be a very stressful time in your life. In my career, I have dealt with thousands of lawyers, I've dealt with thousands of law firms, and I can confidently recommend to you Keith M. Davidson at kmdlaw.com. Available 24 hours, 7 days a week. Just log into kmdlaw.com. That's kmdlaw.com. Or you can call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. That's 833-4KMD-LAW. Personal injury, wrongful death, STDs, sexual assault, car accidents. They handle it all efficiently and professionally. It doesn't matter how imposing the opposition may be, because the team at kmdlaw.com are battle-tested and fierce. They will not stop until justice prevails. Go to kmdlaw.com or call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. If you're in for the fight of your life, stop screwing around and contact KMD Law.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. You can find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting. You can go to my website, emailrevealer.com, or you can just email me directly at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. If you like our show, be sure and check out our Patreon. We put up about 8 hours of new content every month on Patreon, exclusive content, but also these shows that you hear now, like Monday to Friday on AM/FM radio. We put these shows up. We edit out all the advertisements. I know a lot of people hate the ads, so we put it up without the ads. And then, of course, our archives are free at Spreaker.com. There's a chat room over there. You can ask questions. And also to do an exclusive live show there every Friday night. But also, too, you get an email notification anytime I put up new content. And I do play repeats up there every night. I'm very excited about our guest today, Kieran Tapsell, who's an attorney from Australia. And he's written the book called Potiphar's Wife, the Vatican's secret and child sexual abuse. Mr. Tapsell, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. Tell us about yourself. Who is Kieran Tapsell?
Well, I'm a retired civil lawyer, and prior to that, before becoming a lawyer, I spent nearly 6 years in a Roman Catholic seminary training to be a priest. I eventually left because I didn't think it was for me, and then I became a lawyer. And I practiced mainly in commercial litigation. And then after I retired, I became interested in canon law because they were calling a royal commission into institutional abuses or the responses by institutions to child sexual abuse. And a couple of things happened which made me want to examine go back and study canon law, which I had studied, by the way, in seminary for about 3 years, but only, that was fairly cursory.
What brought your attention to child sexual abuse, though, in the Catholic Church?
Well, I have to make it clear, I was never abused myself,
right.
And I didn't, as I was younger, I didn't know about it, to be honest. Of course, as I got older and became a lawyer, I would be, see court cases while I was in court about child sexual abuse. I didn't really practice that much in the criminal area. I was mainly in commercial litigation, but I was aware of the problem. Why I became interested in canon law was because I read an article back in about 2007 where a Australian bishop who used to be one of my seminary teachers and someone whom I really admired of all the people there, there were no accusations against him in terms of sexual abuse, but it was alleged that he had covered up several of the priests in his diocese who had been abusing children. And he had done what canon law, as I subsequently found out, canon law required him to do, which was to conduct a canonical investigation of what had happened. And he appointed a couple of canon lawyers to do that, and they interviewed the witnesses and prepared a report. Now, nothing happened to those priests. I understand now why nothing had happened, because of the deficiencies in canon law, but at that time I didn't. And the victims became impatient, and they went to the police, and they told the police that there already had been a canonical investigation. So the police contacted this bishop, and they said, well, look, we want to see the statements of the witnesses, and we want to see the report provided by the canon lawyers. And he said, no, I can't. It's subject to clergy privilege. Well, in our civil law, there's no such thing as clergy privilege. So they issued a search warrant, and they searched his diocesan offices. They got what they wanted. They prosecuted the priest, and the priest went to jail. And when I was reading this, I thought, why did this good man not hand that information over to the police? And I suspected, because of my experience in the seminary, it had to have something to do with canon law. Couldn't be certain, but that was a hunch I had. So I then went looking, and of course, by 2007, the internet was well on its way. You could get into just about every newspaper and library in the world, and I started looking. And I found this secret law called Crimen Solicitationis, passed in 1922, which basically imposed what was called, at that time, the secret of the Holy Office, was later called the Pontifical Secret, over all information about child sexual abuse by clergy. Now, I should add, I wasn't the first person to find that. In fact, it was discovered in about 2003 in the United States when all this litigation started and lawyers had been issuing subpoenas. And they found this document in the secret archive of one of the American archdioceses. And an American priest and canon lawyer, Tom Doyle, whom you may have heard of,
Sure.
he had actually written some articles about it, So that's how I started. But then I decided to, and at that time, well, a couple of years later, I kept doing this research out of curiosity more than anything else. And then in 2012, the Australian government announced this Royal Commission. And by that stage, there had been a couple of other inquiries. There was one in the United States, in Massachusetts. There was another in Ireland. And both of these inquiries said that the secrecy laws of the Vatican had prevented clergy, or bishops in particular, from reporting child sexual abuse to the police. And then, and effectively, what I had discovered then was that the popes were involved in this, because canon law is, apart from the election of popes themselves, there's really no democracy in the church. It's all effectively a dictatorship, and canon law comes from the popes. It can come from his delegates, but ultimately it comes from him. And here was this 1922 document imposing secrecy, and I had discovered that it had been imposed and reimposed and expanded by every pope since, including Pope Benedict. So that's the background to what I discovered, and I thought, because of this Royal Commission, none of the Royal Commissioners or their staff were canon lawyers, and the problem with engaging canon lawyers, apart from, say, Tom Doyle, for example, who was always on the side of victims in this matter, all canon lawyers are connected to the church. So I couldn't imagine, or maybe they would have come clean, I don't know, but, I thought someone had to tell this Royal Commission about canon law, because it wasn't just a question of a culture. It certainly was a culture, but it was a culture of secrecy which was backed up by laws which, if they were disobeyed, could result in the excommunication of bishops or anyone else from the church.
Well, Mr. Tapsell, let me ask you this. You said that Pope Benedict increased these secrecy laws. Now, Pope Benedict was the Pope prior to Pope Francis, am I correct?
Yes, that's right. No, he didn't increase them.
Okay.
In fact, to some extent, he reduced it, and I can explain that later. But he reimposed it, and so did Pope John Paul II. They reimposed it in two decrees in 2001 and 2010.
What do you think it was about 1922 that suddenly caused the Catholic Church to impose these secrecy laws?
Well, look, one of the interesting things about my research was that I just assumed that there was this kind of law going back probably for, tens of centuries that imposed secrecy. And I was very surprised to find that it didn't. And in fact, it was quite the opposite. That from the earliest times, and particularly from the Middle Ages on, for at least 500 or 600 years, there were decrees of 4 councils and 3 popes which stipulated that priests who sexually abused children should be stripped of their status as priests and handed over to the civil authorities for punishment. So I was really surprised. I thought, well, church doesn't change very much, but it's true. I found these documents, I found these laws where the church had quite a proper attitude to child sexual abuse for about 15 centuries. It was not just a sin. It was something which needs to be punished in this life, not which could be forgiven for the next one. And if you look through, for example, the records of the Spanish Inquisition, priests were punished. They were burnt at the stake if they were found to abuse children, and it was publicly known. If it was not publicly known, and the church has always been concerned with scandal, because that means people will leave the church, that they were garroted privately, if you like, in the cell. They were also sentenced to different sentences, like working on the galleys, rowing those boats in the Middle Ages as they did, exile, beheading, all sorts of things. They were punished. Now, they weren't always punished because every legal system can be corrupted, and there were no doubt
Right.
there were cover-ups during that period, and usually it was for the same old reason that we get corruption in our civil legal systems, people of influence or money or whatever, But there's no doubt that the law was there, and that's what surprised me about what happened in 1922.
No, so in 1922 they changed these canon laws only to apply to sexual abuse and pedophilia, or did they make these priests immune and these bishops immune to other kind of crimes as well?
It wasn't. There were four things in Creeman and I should sort of add to this that the secrecy law was imposed in 1922, but as I said to you before, there were 7 decrees requiring priests to be handed over to the civil authorities, and not just for child sexual abuse, for serious crimes, murder or whatever. But in 1910, Pope Pius X decided that the canon law should be codified. So he appointed a commission of which the later Pope Pius XII was the secretary, to codify canon law, to throw out ones. Obviously, there were a lot of canons which were out of date and so forth. So the commission was for them to clean the whole thing up and put in the code, put in whatever was relevant for that time. Now, what they did was, those 7 decrees that I mentioned, they just threw them all out. They abolished them. So there was no longer any obligation under canon law to hand over priests to the civil authorities. And the church then decided that it would deal with these things on their own. Priests would be put on a canonical trial, but they wouldn't be handed over to the civil authorities. So that happened in 1917 with the first Code of Canon Law. And then 5 years later, in 1922, Crimen Civitationis was promulgated, which imposed the strictest secrecy on all information about child sexual abuse. Now, let me just say one other thing. Private confession, that is, when a priest privately confesses to a priest, was started in Irish monasteries in about the 6th century. But then it spread right throughout the church, and the church has always had a serious problem relating to the solicitation of sex in the confessional. Now, it's usually women, but not always women. It could have been men too. But it wasn't so much children, because children did not go to confession until the age of 12 or 14. So, but what Pius X did, he lowered the age of confession to 7, which they regarded as the time when you you can reason properly. And of course, as we all know, those of us who were brought up in the church, at the age of 7, children make their first confession and they make their first communion. But that's only been in force since 2010. But you can see what's happened. The church had this problem of soliciting sex in the confessional, and now it was having children going to confession. So Pope Pius X's successor, Pope Pius XI, did 2 things. Firstly, he increased the sort of scrutiny of people who were becoming priests, who were entering seminaries to become priests, to try and keep out people. They weren't very successful, by the way, but to keep out potential pedophiles. But if they did get through and become priests, there was a huge problem of scandal, much more than was there before, because if, a priest was using confessional to seduce a woman or perhaps a man, that was bad enough. But children was an entirely different matter. So what did he do? He imposed the strictest secrecy over all information about child sexual abuse. So 2 things. Try and stop people becoming, or pedophiles getting into seminaries. And the second thing, if they did get through, then you cut off the information at its source. And that's the background to it. there are some other reasons as well, which I can explain if you wish.
You know, that's fascinating because I took my first confession in the third grade around 7 years old, and I never knew this about them using the confessional to solicit sex from people confessing. But just imagine if you're a 7-year-old and you walk in there and you confess, I stole money from my mother's wallet. You know what I mean? And now that priest can hold that over on you.
Oh, I don't know that it was so much that. It's usually what we these days call grooming.
Right.
People would, priests would groom children, and meet them outside the confessional. I mean, the confessional isn't the most appropriate place physically to be carried. But it has happened. It's happened here in Australia. In the Royal Commission, there was a priest who was seducing children and was actually doing so in the confines of the church.
Right.
After confession. Yeah. By the way, I should add that the church regarded this canonical crime of seducing sex from anyone in the confessional as a very serious thing. But again, the problem was you only had one witness, and someone could accuse a priest of doing it, and he'd deny it. Well, what are they going to do? It's very hard to prove. And that law, crimen solicitationis, is a Latin term which means the crime of soliciting. So most of that law related to soliciting sex in the confessional, but then it was extended to child sexual abuse generally. It's got nothing to do with confession, and also to homosexuality and bestiality. But it was most important in relation to child sexual abuse because this was becoming a real problem in the church. It always had been, to some extent, but it seems that what all these modern inquiries have taken up, that it just took off, certainly in the 50s, 60s and afterwards.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I have on my website the full 780-page grand jury report of Pennsylvania, where they looked into this. Yeah, and it's for free. You can get it there for free. And I encourage people, if you can't stomach to read the whole 780 pages, there's a 20-page summary at the start where the grand juries took their mission so seriously, and they knew everybody wasn't going to read the whole thing, that they did a summary at the start. And anybody can read the 20-page summary. I think one day I'm going to read it live on the air because the focus of the clergy up in that area seems to be that this was their main focuses of targeting children for abuse. Have you found that to be the case over where you are too in Australia?
Well, I don't know that it's a question of... there was certainly, in some parts of Australia, there's no doubt there were sort of pedophile rings amongst clergy. There's a city called Ballarat outside Melbourne in Victoria, which was particularly bad. Not only priests, but brothers, particularly the Christian brothers, and it seems that there was these connections between the people so inclined. Now, look, whether or not the Royal Commission had to look into this whole question, did people who were inclined or sexually attracted to children join the church for the sake of getting access to more children? Well, I think their conclusion was inconclusive about that. There were undoubtedly some who were like that. But I think there was a much greater extent of child sexual abuse, which resulted probably more from having an opportunity. So people who, may have even been heterosexual, but they had an opportunity with boys. I mean, you find that in jails, for example. And also, there was they found that the numbers have now gone down, and two reasons have been given for that. One is there's very few boys who want to become altar boys now. Probably partly for, what's happened or bad publicity. But also, they closed down most of the boarding schools in Australia. Now, that wasn't done because of child sexual abuse. It was done well before, all this hit the fan. It happened because for economic reasons. But the fact of the matter is that there does seem to have been a decrease in the sexual abuse of children.
I suppose also, too, now that parents are aware that this is an issue, if their son did become an altar boy, they would keep a much closer eye on the situation rather than having that blind trust like my parents had when I was in Catholic school. I was never an altar boy, but I had a friend that was an altar boy, and he seemed to be very unhappy about what was going on. Never told me specifically what it was.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned that they were no longer bringing in the police. They were no longer bringing in outside authorities, but they were handling it on their own on the inside. But were they really suffering any punishment or any consequences for their actions?
Well, no, and this is the other part of because I'm not sure if I mentioned, but I wrote the book. It was published in 2014. The Royal Commission had started, and I had actually started I didn't intend writing a book. I had started off preparing a submission to the Royal Commission for reasons which I mentioned, that I didn't think there'd be anyone in the Royal Commission would have a clue about canon law and its systemic role in child sexual abuse. And the terms of reference of the Royal Commission were that they had to look at systemic issues, not just individual cases.
Right.
Individual cases might indicate where a system was, but really they had to look at this. And there is nothing more systemic than law. It is the system. So that's what I did. I started it off as a submission. I showed it to a few friends, and they said to me, "Oh, look, you've got to turn this into a book. This is much more important. It needs to be more widely known." So that's why I wrote the book. Now, the Royal Commission, in the meantime, had been issuing subpoenas all over the country, and they were getting hold of documents which I could never have hoped to get my hands on, because the church wouldn't have given them to me. So they were produced under subpoena, and the Royal Commission published them. Now, suddenly I had this whole new body of information, documents I could never see before, and I should add that they all supported what I put in the book, supported it 100%. And so I turned the book back into a submission to the Royal Commission. I mean, in the book there's sort of interesting things about particular individuals and things, well, Royal Commissions and courts only interested in that kind of thing, so I cut all that out, so it was more just like a lawyer's brief, if you like. And then and that was published on by the Royal Commission itself. And then I was invited to be, because of that submission, I was invited to become part of a panel of 3 other canon lawyers to advise the Commission, and eventually the Commission came down with its findings. So that's how I got involved with the Royal Commission.
Well, when this Royal Commission came down with findings, did these findings have any teeth, or were they just suggestions?
Oh, no. Well, in a sense, the Royal Commission can only make recommendations. It can't change laws. You can only make recommendations to state legislatures, which they can ignore at their peril.
Right.
Now, they did ask. I did put in the submission about submissions relating to canon law, and you mentioned before about whether your question was originally, and I got distracted, was whether or not these priests were punished. Well, the fact of the matter is that they weren't, and they were shifted around. Now, they were shifted around because it became virtually impossible to dismiss a priest for pedophilia. And that had nothing to do with the reporting laws. I mean, the reporting laws, the obligation to report to the civil authorities is a separate issue. But another issue was the dysfunctional nature of the church's disciplinary system. Now, the church canon law does provide, in serious cases, for the dismissal of a priest, but they were not being dismissed. Now, there's one of the reasons why they weren't being dismissed was because Pope John Paul II, now a saint, was responsible for the 1983 Code of Canon Law. And in that Code of Canon Law, he imposed a limitation period of 5 years on any allegation of child sexual abuse by clergy. So that is, if a boy of 10 had been abused by a priest, and if he did not complain to the church by the time he was 15, the crime disappeared in law, in canon law. Just disappeared. They might be able to do something on some basis to shift him around or do something, but they couldn't dismiss him. Now, in the year 2000, the Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference did a study of, I think it was 402 complaints of child sexual abuse by priests. Now, 97% of those, in 90% of those cases, the limitation period had expired. They could not dismiss those priests. Now, that was just one thing. That, by the way, that has since been changed. In the year 2000, Pope Benedict XVI extended the period to initially 10 years from the 18th birthday of the victim, and later in 2010 he extended it again to 20 years. So that meant 28. They had to be 28 years old. Anything after that, it was the limitation period applied. In 2010, I think it went to the age of 38. Now I think there's a general dispensation that they can extend it anyway. But nevertheless, at the time when most of this abuse was occurring, prior to the year 2000, there was a 5-year limitation period. And even the extensions which Pope Benedict made were not made retrospective. So all these priests could not be dismissed under canon law. So what do they do with them? Well, they shifted them around. They didn't have much choice.
Well, Mr. Tapsell, let me ask you a question, okay? Because we're about to take a commercial break too, but let me ask you a question now. If I can understand, okay, hey, we don't want bad publicity, okay? We don't want to get sued. We don't want bad publicity, so we're not going to send this guy over to the cops. We're going to put a 5-year limit on this thing. But if there's no consequences within the church, then that's complicit. That's enabling this behavior.
Exactly. But then again, you have to look through their prism, if you like. They were looking at the scandal which is caused in the church. See, the aim of the church is to spread the news, to spread the gospel, so that people can go to heaven and not go to hell, etc. So membership of the church is important, and of course they have missionaries which are trying to spread this word all around the world. Well, there's no much point having people coming in through the front door, through missionary activity, if they're going out the back door because the priest has been abusing children. And that was their problem. And mind you, that's not something new.
Right.
It has always been concerned about scandal. It's just that it seemed to have become much more prominent in the last maybe 200 years, that they became really concerned about that and wrote it up into canon law. And I think even apart from the reporting provisions or the lack of them in canon law, the issues relating to scandal, I can't remember the exact number, but I think it's about 40 times the avoidance of scandal is mentioned in the Code of Canon Law.
Okay. This is a good time to take a commercial break. We're here today with Kieran Tapsell. And you can find some of his work, too, on this blog called Pearls and Irritations. It's run by someone else named JohnMenadue.com. That's MENADUE.com. Pearls and Irritations. But if you just Google Kieran Tapsell, it comes right up. And his book also, too, comes right up. You can find it on Amazon.com. It's called The Profiteur's Wife, The Vatican Secret and Child Sexual Abuse. We'll be right back with more of Kieran Tapsell after these messages. And now a word from our sponsors. If you find yourself in need of legal representation, it can be a very stressful time in your life. In my career, I have dealt with thousands of lawyers, I've dealt with thousands of law firms, and I can confidently recommend to you Keith M. Davidson at kmdlaw.com. Available 24 hours, 7 days a week. Just log into kmdlaw.com. That's kmdlaw.com. Or you can call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. That's 833-4KMD-LAW. Personal injury, wrongful death, STDs, sexual assault, car accidents. They handle it all efficiently and professionally. It doesn't matter how imposing the opposition may be, because the team at KMDlaw.com are battle-tested and fierce. They will not stop until justice prevails. Go to KMDlaw.com or call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. If you're in for the fight of your life, stop screwing around and contact KMD Law. The Opperman Report is brought to you by Aquadam.net. You can give them a call at 707-764-2119. A flooded home is never easy to deal with. You're left with the mess to clean up, the insurance companies to deal with, and not to mention all the memories, the precious memories that are lost in the flood. You can never replace those. And Aquadam can be a tool in your arsenal to protect your home and property from the floodwaters. The cofferdam is filled with water to control water and is reusable as long as it's taken care of. It can protect your home or business from rising floodwaters like a dam, but without the beavers. It can also be used in construction. If you need an area to be dewatered, an Aquadam can do the job. An Aquadam was used at SeaWorld in Orlando for the Mako roller coaster ride during the coaster's construction by dewatering the work area. An Aquadam is now dewatering the work area at San Antonio SeaWorld for their newest roller coaster ride. An Aquadam has been used in many construction projects all around the U.S. and all around the world. Now give Aquadam a call, 707-764-2119. You can look them up online at aquadam.net. You can find them on Facebook at Aquadam Inc. You call them up, you email them, you tell them Ed Opperman sent you, and they're going to take 10% off the price. Aquadam.net, 707-764-2119. Silk City Hot Sauce. A small batch hot sauce prepared with farm-grown peppers. Rich and vibrant taste, no artificial ingredients, 100% pure goodness. 8 flavors from mild to wild. The sweet and spicy Mango Madness, the green jalapeno sauce called Aztec Attack. The Dragon features fire-roasted peppers and pure Vermont maple syrup. Killer hot sauces for the true hot sauce fanatic, a blend of ghost peppers, habanero peppers, honey, and garlic, and more. You gotta see the bottles, too. Each flavor has original comic book artwork. You gotta see them. Go to SilkCityHotSauce.com. SilkCityHotSauce.com. Enter promo code ED, ED, to save 15%, and you'll also receive a free bottle of hot sauce.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman, and we're here today with Kieran Tapsell, and we're talking about his book, Potiphar's Wife, The Vatican Secret and Child Sex Abuse. You can find some of Kieran's Tapsell's articles on a blog called Pearls and Irritations, and that's at johnmenadu.com. But if you just Google Kieran Tapsell, Kieran Tapsell, that blog will come right up, and his book, Potiphar's Wife, comes right up too. Mr. Tapsell, why did you name the book Potiphar's Wife? Now, does that connect to Joseph in the Bible? He was sold into slavery, and Potiphar's wife tried to seduce him?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. We don't know, never know the name of Potiphar's wife. Potiphar was the captain of the Pharaoh's guard, but Potiphar's wife is never mentioned. She's just known as Potiphar's wife. And Joseph, of course, was sold into slavery by his brothers, and he worked for Potiphar. And Potiphar's wife tried to seduce Joseph, and he declined. And she then falsely accused him of trying to rape her. So he was then thrown in jail, and that, of course, that the story goes on with all the magic things that he did and so forth. The reason I called it the book Potiphar's Wife is that there were a number of senior cardinals in the church, archbishops and cardinals, who were accusing children of seducing priests and then making false accusations, and quite often saying that it was all because of money. You know, they wanted to sue the church, etc., and they were false accusations. And this happened, well, there was 2 of them. There was one from Nicaragua and another one who was the prefect of the Congregation for Clergy, Cardinal Castrion, who was a Colombian. And there were several others who had said the same thing. Children were seducing priests. Now, of course, apart from anything else, that completely overlooks the fact of this differential power relationship between them. You've got a child, and you've got someone who's been taught that these people stand in the place of God. You've got this, and not just an ordinary power relationship like between a policeman and a child. You've got it between someone who is part of the belief system that has been inculcated in these children. So that's the reason why I call it Potiphar's wife, but it's really about the pontifical secret which prevented child sexual abuse being reported to the police, and also about the deficiencies in the canonical disciplinary system, which meant the priests were not dismissed, they were shifted around, and they continued to abuse.
Fascinating. There's even, in the case we had here in Massachusetts, the big scandal over there, they confronted one of these priests at his doorstep, and the news media did, and on film, on camera, he said he was not aware that it was a crime to have sex with children. He was never aware that there was anything. Yeah, fascinating. People can Google it and look that up. It's just fascinating.
And that was something which continually came out in the Royal Commission here. That
really?
Priests priests and brothers were saying, we did not regard it as a crime, but as a moral failure, which could be cured by confession. Now, the thing about that is, it was just, the commissioners just looked in disbelief at this, because historically, child sexual abuse until the 1917 Code of Canon Law was regarded as a crime where priests should have been handed over to civil authority. But you've got to understand also a culture in the church, and I have a chapter in the book discussing culture and law. Now, not just canon law, but every law. There's a really very close connection between culture of an organisation and its laws, whether it's a state or it's a church or local golf club, for that matter. So laws are often a reflection of the culture. Now, there's no doubt that by the time 1917 came along, the church was obsessed with culture, with secrecy. It regarded priests as being special people. They were ordained by God, and they became the servants of God. They had this special relationship with God. So they were special people. And they shouldn't be treated like ordinary criminals. Now, there's a very interesting thing which I discovered in my research, is that the church often enters into what's called concordats, or treaties, effectively, with foreign countries in order to, be able to run their organisation. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. It's perfectly proper. But in many of those, and I've listed them in the book, in Italy, Latvia, Poland, Dominican Republic, Spain, of course, under Franco, these concordats provided the priests, no matter what they were accused of, it could have been murder, would not serve their time in a jail with the common criminals. They would serve them in monasteries. As you can imagine, that would be a lot more comfortable than being in a jail. But they were special people, so that was one thing. The other thing was that the canon lawyers from about the 17th century on looked upon the church as being just like a state. It didn't need the civil state anymore. It had its own universities, it had its own churches, it had its own laws in canon law, it had its own schools, everything. It was just like a little state within a state.
Hospitals, even hospitals and orphan, yeah, they have everything, yeah.
Orphanages, the whole thing. They were just a little world unto themselves. But there's another interesting thing which I thought about at the time. Cremus Citationis was passed in 1922. Marconi had invented the radio, and the Vatican was very much aware that the radio was a new form of evangelizing people. And in fact, Marconi set up the Vatican radio, and the Vatican was the first religion in the world to use radio as a means of propaganda, if you like. But there was a disadvantage, just like the modern internet, there is a disadvantage with these things, and one of them is that scandal could now be spread at the speed of light.
Mm.
And in 1920 was the first commercial radio station in the United States. I think it was the Westinghouse. 2 years later, Pope Pius XI imposed the secret of the Holy Office over all information about child sexual abuse, as well as homosexuality and bestiality. So that's another thing that had happened, which actually encouraged, if you like, this imposing that secrecy under canon law. Now, as I said earlier, there is this connection between law and culture. And you can't say one comes first and one comes second. Sure, you can say there's a change in culture. For example, the same-sex marriage things. There's changing culture in society. But there was a cardinal, American cardinal, wrote I thought a well-argued article about opposing same-sex marriage, because he talked about this connection between law and culture. And that if you legalise same-sex marriage, then what the state is teaching is that sex is a free-for-all. Now, it's interesting because one of the strongest proponents of same-sex marriage is a senator in Australia named Penny Wong, who is in a same-sex relationship. And she agrees with this close connection between law and culture. She agreed with Cardinal George, except where they differed was what he taught. She said, no, it's not teaching people about sex as a free-for-all. What it is teaching them is about people who have a different sexual orientation should be treated equally. That's all. So, the principle which Cardinal George said is correct, Penny Wong agrees it's correct, they just disagreed about what the lesson was. Now, when you get back to the church, what was the lesson that was being taught by all this secrecy, by all this abolition of decrees to go to the police or to hand press over the police? It wasn't a crime to sexually abuse children. So while, people who are sexually abusing children may not have known much about church history, may not have understood that the church had this continuous problem of soliciting sex in the confessional and all this kind of thing, or that it had regarded child sexual abuse as crimes up until 1917. What was being taught then by this whole idea of secrecy? The lesson that was taught was, it's only a moral failure. It's not really a crime. And that's what all these superiors of religious orders were, one after the other, were telling the Royal Commission. And I just have to say that Royal Commissioners would sit there gobsmacked. Because surely in papers they would have read, that people were charged with child sexual abuse of one form or another in history. But anyway, that's the effect of culture, you see. And that was the culture in the church, there's no doubt about it.
Now, Mr. Tapsell, after you did your submission to the Royal Commission, was there an outcry? After the commission, the results of the commission, was there a public outcry, and what were the results of the commission?
Well, there was a public outcry all the way through the commission. It went for 5 years, and of course there was one new scandal after one new scandal, so it wasn't as if everything waited until the result of the Royal Commission. In many respects, all the Royal Commission was doing, in some ways, was just repeating what had been going on publicly, and had been, because the hearings were in public. So, of course, the press was there all the time. So, there was an outcry all the time. Now, but what had actually happened with the Royal Commission, in my submission, I put in some proposals about how canon law should be changed. There were 21 of them, I think. The Royal Commission came out and they accepted 16 of those, and they included those in their report. They also threw in a few others, which I hadn't really thought about, but it doesn't matter now. And there were recommendations about celibacy and things like that, which I didn't feel competent anyway to be saying anything about anyway. I left that up to, psychologists and the other experts before the Royal Commission. But in terms of what should be changed, the most important one was the abolition of pontifical secret, and the others were the recommendations about changes to the canonical disciplinary system. Well, nothing has been done about that latter, about the changes of the canonical disciplinary system, except, I think, they raised an age for child pornography. I think that was something fairly minor. But I think, in fairness, I should say that the Vatican has decided to review its whole penal system, and that's a process still going on. But getting on to the pontifical secret, which is really, for me, was always the most important thing. The Commission's report came out in 2017. Nothing really much happened, and then in 2019, Pope Francis decided to have a big symposium in London about child sexual abuse and invited all the heads of bishops' conferences and others to come over to Rome. Now, what interested me was that at that meeting, 3 very senior speakers came out attacking the pontifical secret. Cardinal Marx from Germany, Professor Ghisloni, who was a professor of canon law at the Gregorian University.
I think I lost you.
Well, now, what happened then was... Go on.
No, I thought I lost you for a second there, but go ahead.
So they criticised it. But Pope Francis didn't do anything, except I think in July that year, he then passed a law within the Vatican City which required reporting of all child sexual abuse allegations to the Vatican civil authorities. Now, of course, they're clergy, but nevertheless, they're separate to, the canonical things. They run the Vatican City, basically, because it's an independent state. But there was nothing about what had to be done with the rest of the world, not just the 30. That only protected 30 children who lived in the Vatican City. Oh. The daughters or sons of Swiss guards and people like that. And so he didn't do anything about that. But then in December 2019, he announced the abolition of the pontifical secret. Now, I had always argued, and in those John Menadue things, I had always argued that that wasn't enough. It wasn't good enough just to abolish the pontifical secret. Yes, sure, that allowed bishops now to report. But they had to have some kind of mandatory reporting, because there's a basic principle in every legal system, every coherent legal system, including canon law, is that no one can be punished unless they've broken the law. So if a bishop decided that they weren't going to report to the police, where was the punishment? What part of canon law had they broken? And unless there was an obligation to report to the police, there was nothing. And that's what I continually kept saying, that they had to do something about it. Well, they did eventually, I think it was July 2020. Previously, Pope Francis had created a new canonical crime, if you like, which was a negligent performance of a bishop's office. And in 2020, the Vatican published a handbook which didn't require mandatory reporting to civil authorities. But what it did do was to set a standard, and that standard was that even though there are no civil laws requiring reporting, bishops are required to report if the other children or if the victim themselves are in danger. Now, so that created a standard. So it's now possible for bishops to be held accountable under canon law, whereas before it wasn't. And even before the abolition of the pontifical secret, it's impossible, because a bishop could simply go, if a complaint was made that he hadn't reported something and therefore he had negligently performed his office, his answer was very simple, and I'd have loved to have been a lawyer appearing for him, a canon lawyer, say, but look, he's obeying the pontifical secret. He can't be punished. He's obeying the law, not disobeying it. So those things have, I think, largely been resolved, and I'm very happy that they have been.
Mr. Tapsell, I can't thank you enough. You've shed light on certain aspects of the Catholic Church that I was not aware of, and I know that my audience wasn't aware of either. The book, if you want to hear more about this, is Potiphar's Wife, The Vatican's Secret and Child Sexual Abuse by Kieran Tapsell. And you can also find more of his writings over at a website called Pearls and Irritations. It's johnmanadu.com. Kieran Tapsell, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ed.
Good night. And now a word from our sponsors. The Opperman Report is brought to you by Aquadam.net. You can give them a call at 707-764-2119. A flooded home is never easy to deal with. You're left with the mess to clean up, the insurance companies to deal with, and not to mention all the memories, the precious memories that are lost in the flood. You can never replace those. And Aquadam can be a tool in your arsenal to protect your home and property from the floodwaters. The cofferdam is filled with water to control water and is reusable as long as it's taken care of. It can protect your home or business from rising floodwaters like a dam, but without the beavers. It can also be used in construction. If you need an area to be dewatered, an Aquadam can do the job. An Aquadam was used at SeaWorld in Orlando for the Mako roller coaster ride during the coaster's construction by dewatering the work area. An Aquadam is now dewatering the work area at San Antonio SeaWorld for their newest roller coaster ride. An Aquadam has been used in many construction projects all around the U.S. and all around the world. Now give Aquadam a call, 707-764-2119. You can look them up online at aquadam.net. You can find them on Facebook at Aquadam Inc. You call them up, you email them, you tell them Ed Opperman sent you, and they're going to take 10% off the price. Aquadam.net, 707-764-2119.
Are you ready to change your life, but don't know how to start? Is your stress and worries keeping you awake at night? Have you been battling grief, anxiety, or depression all alone? Have you lost touch with your own sense of being or spirituality? Soul Free Therapies offers professional and affordable live video streaming counseling and coaching services from the comfort of your own home. Sessions offered in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Go to our website at www.soul-free.com and book your first session today.
If you find yourself in need of legal representation, it can be a very stressful time in your life. In my career, I have dealt with thousands of lawyers, I've dealt with thousands of law firms, and I can confidently recommend to you Keith M. Davidson at kmdlaw.com. Available 24 hours, 7 days a week. Just log into kmdlaw.com. That's kmdlaw.com. Or you can call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. That's 833-4KMD-LAW. Personal injury, wrongful death, STDs, sexual assault, car accidents. They handle it all efficiently and professionally. It doesn't matter how imposing the opposition may be, because the team at kmdlaw.com are battle-tested and fierce. They will not stop until justice prevails. Go to kmdlaw.com or call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. If you're in for the fight of your life, stop screwing around and contact KMD Law. Silk City Hot Sauce. A small batch hot sauce prepared with farm-grown peppers. Rich and vibrant taste, no artificial ingredients, 100% pure goodness. 8 flavors from mild to wild. The sweet and spicy Mango Madness, the green jalapeno sauce called Aztec Attack. The Dragon features fire-roasted peppers and pure Vermont maple syrup. Killer hot sauce is for the true hot sauce fanatic, a blend of ghost peppers, habanero peppers, honey, and garlic, and more. You gotta see the bottles too. Each flavor has original comic book artwork. You gotta see them. Go to silkcityhotsauce.com, silkcityhotsauce.com, enter promo code ED, ED, to save 15%, and you'll also receive a free bottle of hot sauce. OppermanReport.com. Hey, do you like what you're hearing? Do you like the work that you see us doing here at Opperman Report? You can support that work by becoming a member at OppermanReport.com. And as you have access to over 200 exclusive shows and interviews that you can't find on YouTube or Spreaker or iHeart or iTunes or KYAH. You can't find them anywhere else online, exclusive to our member sections, to our members. Also, too, there's images, videos, documents, court docs. And don't forget, you can hear your ad played here on the Opperman Report, reach hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people on a daily basis, because the show is repeated every day all over the world. Contact me at oppermanreport@gmail.com and I'll give you a good deal on advertising rates.